What do you consider as a CPPCC Standing Committee member about the significance of this proposal?
I think this is a very great step forward for the Hong Kong political reform because first of all, we have lowered the standard, I would say the number of people to be elected and nominated as a candidate from the 150 members of the election committee. We have lowered down to 120 members of the election committee, then they can nominate one candidate. So it's a very big step forward, and also I think this is credit to the Hong Kong SAR government, the constitutional reform people working very hard in conjunction with the support from the NPC. I think this is a big surprise for all of us too.
Well, is it a big surprise that there's a lot of controversy, apparently, Ms. Yang, from Beijing's perspective about the debate about this proposal?
Well, number one, many observers in mainland have the perception and impression, say, in Hong Kong, some of people has conducted the so-called ABC position, say anything but central government's decision. So such a destructive position does not help to Hong Kong's future. And secondly, I think it's normal to have disputes about any kind of political reform plan. Just like Ms. Wu mentioned, that is the great event. I think that will be a historical milestone in Hong Kong's political development. So the disputes is quite normal, but all the disputes should go along with rule of law. That is the base.
Let me go to you, Mr. Xie, in Hong Kong. Earlier, Mr. Yang mentioned about this ABC phenomenon. Whether that's true or not is up for debate. But on the other hand, at this moment, opposition members of the Legislative Council have been vowing to veto this plan. And this has been, of course, creating quite a stir in the Hong Kong society. What do you think about this division of opinions in Hong Kong? Who is the majority and who is the minority? Who's speaking in a way on behalf of the people? If we could have anyone to speak on behalf of the people.
As you said, certainly this reform package has received very different feedback from different factions within the Hong Kong community. There are people who support it, and there are people who have been is very strongly opposed to it. I think in the Hong Kong society, this division is pretty deep. At the same time, I think if you look at the reactions to the Occupy Central movement, that was somewhat of a precursor to this. I think towards the end part of the Occupy Central movement, probably majority of the Hong Kong people were quite upset and quite frustrated by that overall movement. And therefore, if you sort of extrapolate that from that sort of phenomenon, one would argue that this particular reform package should have been receiving the majority support from the Hong Kong people.
I see. Let me come back to you, Ms. Wu. You're a CPPCC Standing Committee member, so people would naturally take you as, quote, pro-Beijing. So let me ask you the question from the other side. When the opposition are arguing that, well, why don't we have direct elections? Why don't we have, in Hong Kong, quote, one person, one vote, in, as they say, a real way? Why not?
Well, I think if we look to the basic law, which is under the stipulation of the National People's Congress, on the 31st of August, there was a stipulation that in accordance with the basic law, the rule that we are supposed to have a progress in our political reform. So in accordance with what we used to have 1,200 people to elect the chief executive, now we have a mass progress. That means eventually now, if we can approve this package, 5 million people in Hong Kong will have the right to vote. And this is big progress because Hong Kong is under one country and two systems. So the opposition, I think they only thought about looking at the Western system of election. And they totally try to ignore that we are in one country, which is the People's Republic of China, and we are part of China. So we have to adhere to the rule of law of China.
Is this a rule of law issue, or is this different interpretation about what Hong Kong's future should be like issue?
I think it's the interpretation and the respect for the rule of law.
All right, Mr. Xie, what do you make of this?
Make of what? Sorry.
Make of the fact of the opposition, whether they represent or not the majority, but is this what we are talking about, a rule of law issue, or is this an issue about different interpretations about what Hong Kong's future should be like?
Well, the basic law is very clear. I think, people either believe or obey the basic law, or they don't want to obey the basic law. So I think on that one, it's almost undebatable. But I think the opposition people would want to challenge the basic law, and in fact, as you know, some of them would really want the basic law to be somewhat revised to their favor. So I think overall speaking, it is a debate on different people's perspective on what Hong Kong's future should be and how Hong Kong's politics should be written from now on. That is where the debate is.
But then let me go one step further, Mr. Xie. Of course, this is a very interesting debate that we see in Hong Kong. If even the basic law is up for debate, then I wonder if there's anything that people can hold on to about what the current reality of Hong Kong should be like, how Hong Kong should be governed, and what Hong Kong's future should be about. After all, that is the fundamental legal document about one country, two systems. So if all of these are up for debates, can anything be done? And can anything be done fairly?
Well, I was suggesting, or I was just sort of making the observation that some people in Hong Kong have made that suggestion.
I understand.
I don't believe that that is the mainstream thinking in Hong Kong.
I see.
And I don't believe that Hong Kong people